Summer's in full swing, bringing vacations, family gathering, and lots of time with the kids. But if you're worried about your co-parent's alcohol use, this season can also be very stressful. And that's where SoberLink comes in. Imagine your kids are off on a beach trip with your co-parent. With SoberLink, you'll receive instant proof of your ex's sobriety via text or email. These portable, discreet devices use built-in facial recognition and tamper sensors to prevent cheating, giving you peace of mind that your kids are safe no matter where they are. SoberLink is more than just a breathalyzer and is second to none when it comes to rebuilding trust and improving accountability. I've personally seen it work for others, and I know it can work for you. So safeguard your summer with SoberLink. Visit soberlink.com/Susan to learn more and get $50 off on your device.
Coming up on today's episode of the Divorce and Beyond podcast.
When I saw the effects of playing house for a significant period of time before the marriage, and that's when I started seeing the perils of doing that, because it was really wreaking havoc on how we were going to do things in their divorce as far as property acquisition, debt acquisition, kids issues, etc. Our law, at least in Texas, and most of the country, there is no provision for playing house.
Hello, and welcome to the Divorce and Beyond podcast. I'm Susan Guthrie, your host. As a top divorce attorney and family law mediator for 30 years, I know what you need to know to get through your divorce, and most importantly, how to move beyond it to thrive and transition to your new future. My experts and I are here to give you the insider view into the process, so listen in for the wisdom and expert information you need on your journey through divorce and beyond. Hello, and welcome to today's podcast. I'm Susan Guthrie, your host, and today, listeners, we are going to be talking to one of my colleagues. In fact, she and I have just been talking, and I have to say, in many ways, we have similar backgrounds. She is a more than 30-year family law attorney. That sounds familiar, I know, to you all. She is a past president of the American Academy of Matrimonial Lawyers, AAML, if you've heard that from your attorneys. And really, AAML is, I would call it, the premier academy of our practitioners in this country. So to have been the president of that organization is quite an accomplishment. And as I step into being the chair of the ABA's section of dispute resolution, I also know how much work it is. Bravo to you on that. Susan is practicing. She's with her firm down in Houston, Texas, and she brought a fascinating topic to the table that she calls the perils of playing house. And I have to tell you, listeners, the minute I saw that, I said, this is of the moment we have to talk about this. Thank you so much for coming, Susan, and thank you for bringing a topic that I think, it's not that it's brand new, but I think it's just emerging as a more and more relevant and interesting conversation as time passes, as both you and I know, having been doing this for 30 years. So thank you. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Thank you very much, Susan. It's a pleasure joining you today. I find that the topic becomes a great conversation starter at cocktail parties and other gatherings because people don't know what they don't know, but they're always open to the ideas.
Well, and it's funny you talk about cocktail parties because my listeners all know that I always question whether I'm going to bring up the fact that I was a divorce attorney for so long when people at a cocktail party say, what do you do? Because much like doctors, I find they then tell you the entire story of their divorce or their sister's divorce or their friend's divorce, and you spend the next half hour. But I love that you find that people are open-minded to learning. And I think that's a big key to what you and I both wanted to accomplish with this episode today, is to really educate people on, again, going maybe back a little bit in time, but in those perils of playing house, of cohabitation, of living together, as they used to say in our law, without benefit of marriage, without benefit of that piece of paper going through that ceremony. Because we do know statistically, more and more couples are choosing to live together, to cohabit, but without getting married. In fact, I looked up some of the stats. In 2020, there were over 5 million opposite sex unmarried couples living together in the United States. So that just continues to rise. So what made this such an interesting topic for you? Why is this something that you like to talk about?
Well, it started out when I saw the effects of playing house for a significant period of time before the marriage. And that's when I started seeing the perils of doing that, because it was really wreaking havoc on how we were going to do things in their divorce, as far as property acquisition, debt acquisition, kids issues, etc., where our law, at least in Texas and most of the country, Kansas may be our exception, there is no provision for playing house. There, you do have child support. We do, most of our states, because of a federal system, will have some acknowledgement of paternity, child support, maybe some periods of possession for those kids. But for property acquisition, all of us have to go to our old common law, either landlord-tenant, land use and finance. You may have to look at shared ventures, partnership agreements, all kinds of concepts that you then bring into an interpersonal relationship, and it causes really just some untold misery, because you've got the pre-marriage identification, and then if they've been married for a period of time, it's like you're doing two divorces. So I thought maybe we should bring to the concept, to the community at large, the idea that you can plan for all of this. If you knew at the beginning of your relationship that we may or may not get married, let's put some of these expectations in writing, or at least have a verbal understanding that we can all move forward, and then move once we get married. If we do, that can be a piece of it. So the other place where we saw this, Susan, was in our gay friends. Before they were allowed to marry, we saw the consequences of the benefit of marriage being lost to people that were acting married. They were having children, they were building houses, they had investments, they had employee benefits, and we really had to create a way to be equitable in a relationship like that. So those two pieces brought to the table my idea of making sure that people are educated. And then as time has passed, it's given me an opportunity to visit with people about maybe some cohabitation agreements. I didn't know that Texas had that until I started really working in the area about 10 years ago. There are ways to solve all of the perils if you know there are perils, except federal benefits. I can't find a way to fix those.
Well, we'd have to fix the federal government, and goodness knows that doesn't seem like something that will happen immediately. Well, and I think you have pointed out so many things right there that are of key importance here. One is that education is everything in this topic. People make decisions. Certainly when people get married, I've talked on this show about understanding that when you get married, you enter into some legal relationships a legal relationship that comes with obligations and benefits of being married, right? Those are defined by our law. They may vary a little bit by the states. But what you're pointing out that I want listeners, that really starts this whole thing, and I want listeners to be aware of, is when you live together without being married, you don't get those same rights and obligations in place. So you may be thinking, great, I don't get the obligations, but guess what, folks? You don't get the rights either. And then it's further complicated because there might be some laws around children that you might have, whether you're living together or not, just whether you're married or not, if you're unmarried parents. But there's very little law if any, around, at least in family law, around your property, your money, your house you might live in together, your benefits, as you pointed out, both employer, et cetera. So you've got, it's a very complicated pile, and the law doesn't really provide you with much support at all. Yet many people choose to live together because they're in love, because it will save money on not paying 2 rents or mortgages, because they, for a myriad of reasons, goodness knows there might be. But there's not a lot of education around what that means legally. So could you start there? Just say we have a young couple or an older couple, goodness knows, you can choose to live together at any time, but a couple considering moving in together. What are some of the legal issues that they should be thinking about ahead of time?
You just brought up a perfect example of you have to know your own circumstances. So if it's an older couple and they're even, let's say they're over 65 and they're collecting their Social Security, there may be detriments to getting married. It may be financially and legally better off for them to share a place to live and figure out how they're going to share expenses. So now let's go back to your question of the younger couple, but I couldn't let that opportunity pass.
No, that's a
it
very
all
good point.
depends on where they are on the spectrum of their lives and their estate establishment. Okay, so we've got the young couple, they're in love, or maybe they're not, maybe they're just in, they like each other a lot, and somebody is losing a lease, and someone says, well, why don't you move in with me? And that way we're, it's more of a financial, loving, let me help you out, you come over and stay here. And that's how it starts. So when that starts, if just think about it, if one person is on the lease, they are the ones that have the right to determine who's there. So just think about that. If I move in with you and we have a fight, are you just going to kick me out? If I move in with you, do I get rid of my stuff, my couches, my stuff? And then when we break up, I get nothing? Just think through, when we change our dynamic and our stuff, do I need to put something in writing, or should we at least talk about it? Some people move in together and express, I never want to get married. Some people think, well, we're not even going to talk about marriage. Let's just see how this relationship goes, and then we'll move on from there. So those that move in together, and this I think most people live together for some period of time before they get married. I just think that's statistically, whether they admit to it or not, because they want to try things out. Will I be able to handle the bathroom, toilet paper rolls, and the toothpaste, and all the things that people get worried about? Do I want to share space? Because there's being in love, and then there's sharing life experiences. And those are actually two different dynamics of a relationship. So now we're living together. We've got this young couple, and they're trying to figure out what they do next. And let's say they've both got jobs, and they're both contributing to their employee benefits. They've figured out a way to share the rent, all the expenses. Now it's time to buy a house. Because most people that are living together don't think about the order that they want to do things. There's this great deal on a house. Let's go buy this house. So this couple is buying a house together, but they haven't really thought through how they're going to do the finances of it. Well, that causes all kinds of grief, because mortgage companies don't mind letting people borrow money, but they're going to look at who's credit worthy. And credit worthy may be stronger on one person or the other. Or let's say the mortgage company says, great, we'll take both of you on this note. Both of you will be on this house. But depending on where you live, who contributes money to the down payment, who contributes money to the payment on the mortgage, will own more of the house if they're not married. If they're married, it doesn't make any difference who's paying the house. So we get married, we buy this house together. I say, Susan, listen, I'll take care of all the mortgage payments. You take care of the utilities and the food, and that it'll be about the same amount of money. At the end of our relationship, guess what? I own the house, and thank you for paying the utilities on it with no benefit. Again, knowing before you enter into any other contract, another lease, a mortgage, any co-ownership, think through, what does the law provide for me as an unmarried person? Because some people move in together and have no intention of marrying again. And some people move in together thinking they're going to get married. They don't. And now these two unhappy, unmarried people own a house. Well, unlike in a divorce where the divorce court says, I order the house sold, or I order the house be awarded to Susan, and you get to pay the other Susan her interest in that. In a non-married situation, we have to figure out how we're going to partition a house, which in Texas is a whole nother court system.
Oh, gosh, yes. I think in most states.
I think the best advice is before you sign another contract without benefit of marriage, because there's benefits and detriments, without the benefit of the marriage, figure out what the detriments are. What are we going to do? And you can solve that in simple ways. We just have a joint venture. We're going to jointly own this house. If one of us wants out, this is how we're going to do it. If we both want the house, this is how we get it resolved. This is how we get it back. Just like strangers do in the other kinds of world that we intersect with. Business developers do it all the time. Partners in law firms do it all the time. This isn't rocket science, but when romance is involved, we forget we need to take care of business.
When romance is involved, we forget to take care of business. That's the perfect soundbite, because you just said it. Law partners do this and businesses do this. Enter into contracts that clearly define what the business relationship consists of. Yet when you bring romance into it, when you bring a relationship, a romantic relationship into it, people do tend to just operate on trust. I just trust that if this doesn't work out, the other person's going to do the right thing. Yet you and I both know 30 plus years each in the family law arena, right? Unfortunately, when people break up, whether it's a divorce or a breakup, not always do they do everything that you wish they would do, nor do people have the same ideas as we've, encountered many times as to what's fair in that breakup.
And now let's say this couple, for whatever reason, never wants to marry. You still need to take care of business, because what if your partner dies?
Yes.
If they haven't managed all of this in their wills, which again, it's just another contract. Before you sign contracts, make sure you think through all the parameters. If they haven't figured out, if I die and we co-own stuff, what happens to my house? What happens to the mortgage on my house? Just like law partners, just like business ventures, just like everybody else on the planet does. When you fall in love, do not disengage your brain.
When you fall in love, do not disengage your brain. It's so true. And people have a very difficult time having these conversations, I think. We talk, and I've done episodes on having prenuptial agreements, having these difficult conversations before marriage. But the reality is less and less people are getting married these days, or are doing what you said, living together for some period of time to sort of try it out to see if they want to get married. And the problem is they don't ask any of these questions before they enter into it. There's a very sort of casual attitude about joining together your lives under one roof. But as you've just been pointing out, it's not just the living under one roof. This really starts to flow down to in this relationship. Hey, listeners. Are you navigating the tough waters of divorce and feeling overwhelmed by the process? Let me introduce you to Hello Divorce, your ultimate ally in making this journey smoother and less stressful. Hello Divorce offers a modern, affordable approach to divorce, combining expert legal advice with easy-to-use online tools. So whether you need help with paperwork, mediation, or simply some guidance, Hello Divorce has you covered. Plus, their flat fee services mean no hidden costs, just clear upfront pricing. Visit hellodivorce.com today to learn more and take the first step toward your fresh start. Remember, you don't have to do this alone. Hello Divorce is here to help. Stay tuned for more from leading matrimonial attorney Susan Myres as she shares the potential pitfalls and legal issues you may face when you cohabit before or instead of marrying.
Just being educated about before you move in together with somebody, and your stuff goes to their place. Listen to podcasts like this. Go talk to a lawyer who understands the pros and the cons and offers, if your state allows it, even cohabitation agreements so that it's written. It's not just understood by these independent contracts like the mortgage, because you can fix most of these perils if you plan ahead.
If you are enjoying this episode, don't forget to check out the almost 300 episodes we have in the archive. We have all the top experts on every topic related to divorce and to thriving in your beautiful beyond. So visit the podcast website at divorceandbeyondpod.com for more.
And now we return to today's show.
You highlighted the house because that's such a common issue that people will run into if they've been cohabiting for a period of time. Because often someone will buy a house or someone already has a house or something like that. But it's not just real property. It's not just property like houses. It's you're both contributing, or one of you is contributing to a retirement plan, or putting half their income into a savings account because you're paying half the bills, or whatever these things might be. Yet if you're cohabiting and you break up, you may have no right nor claim to any of those assets. Isn't that correct?
That's correct. And it's not just the dollars going in. It's also the corporate benefits. So people that are employed by companies, it's not just your 401k. They may also have retired. Some companies are thinking about going back to the old-fashioned pensions. We've also got health benefits, life insurance benefits. Those employee benefits, some companies are letting you designate a domestic partner. But if people forget to do that, then you're out of luck. Most things like ERISA, things that are the retirement benefits that are deferred monies, if you're not a spouse, you don't get it. Now, you can designate benefit. Again, there are cures to all of these perils. People just need to think about it. And when you're just living together, you're playing house, people aren't thinking about, oh, I should designate him as my beneficiary on my life insurance through work, or my beneficiary on my credit life, or my whatever it is. They're not thinking it because It's like getting married is almost an afterthought to people. They get their houses, they get their kids, they get their employment, they get their careers going, and it's like, oh yeah, I might as well get married. And again, if they think about it, and if they talk to somebody, you can fix all of that pre-marriage muck by agreements. But if you don't fix that pre-marriage muck by agreement, and you get married, and then the marriage ends by death or divorce, it is a nightmare for the lawyers and your children to try to figure all this out. So it's not just the end of the marriage by somebody wanting to get out. People die, and the same issues, the same scariness. If you don't plan, it will probably turn out not the way you wanted.
Right. And I want to talk about the children's situation, but I definitely wanted to hit on something as well, because we're talking about sort of those benefits of employment. So one of the other statistics that I found said that about 60% of cohabiting couples without children under 18, both of the partners were out there in the workforce. But as you pointed out to me when I told you that statistic, that means 40% have one of the parties who's not working for whatever reason that might be. And we have this whole thing on social media now, this whole trend of stay-at-home girlfriend, hashtag stay-at-home girlfriend. I don't know if I mentioned that to you, but I see that hashtag and as a divorce attorney, or as someone in our world, and knowing what you and I both know, I get so concerned because those posts are sort of glorifying something of being a stay-at-home wife, or having the benefits of it being a stay-at-home wife and living this life of luxury. It's always about, what bag you're carrying and having lunch with your friends and all that. But if you're a stay-at-home wife, your life is very different if the marriage ends than if you're a stay-at-home girlfriend and the relationship ends. Isn't that right?
By a magnitude. But even short-term marriages, if you have a high wage earner, even a short-term marriage can benefit the stay-at-home person. It befuddles me how today someone thought that was a good idea if there isn't some plan. Like, I'm a stay-at-home girlfriend, but I'm going to put aside out of the allowance that they are provided or whatever, they're going to put aside some money. So when this ends, I've got my own nest egg, because if she kicks me out of the house, out of our mansion where I've been having the, life of luxury, and I've got to go get a job, I don't have anything.
Not even job experience, because you've been home.
Right.
Being a stay-at-home girlfriend, you haven't, accrued any interest in anything. But this is another one that could be fixed if you have those difficult conversations, if you know what the perils are. This is something that at least could be addressed in a cohabitation agreement.
These are grown adults. If you want to go play house and know that you're not accumulating any wealth, but you are living a lifestyle that you never aspired to be able to do, then enjoy it. And, don't have shame about it, but don't have an expectation that something different is going to come down the road. Even if they put a ring on it, if someone hasn't said I do, it doesn't count.
No, you get to keep the ring probably, but
depends on the state.
It does
right?
depend on the state. Well, and thank you for pointing that out. There's absolutely no shame in making that decision, as long as you've, your point being, make sure that you're educated about what might be coming. You can make all of your choices. What we want to see is people making educated choices and decisions about how they live their lives.
Well, a completely different podcast for you are the states that still have common law marriage, because those that haven't had the benefit of marriage realize when the relationship ends what they're not getting. And so they're trying to create, or it existed, a common law marriage so that they get the benefit of it. But that's a whole nother conversation.
But a very interesting one. And it's maybe one of those places where the laws are trying to catch up to what people are actually doing in their lives. And that brings me to another area that we've been talking about: money and stuff, right? Property and assets and debts. That'll be another one. That's another thing added into the topic of property. But I didn't want to lose sight of how complicated this can also get when children are brought into the picture, because we do know that the numbers of people having children where the parents are unmarried has really skyrocketed in past years. In fact, in 2020, around 40% of all births in the United States were to unmarried mothers, and it's continued to go up since then. That's a very large number. It used to be much lower even just 10 years ago. So this is another area, though, where you mentioned at the top of the episode, the law does have some provision for parentage. It does have some provision for child support, although you and I both know it's never as much as it costs to raise children. I think in this particular instance, where the law has completely not kept up is for the unwed fathers, who,
Correct.
When those children are born, really have little to no rights unless they go to court. Isn't that correct?
Correct. Now, we will, again, state by state, there are ways for the father to be at the birth, be on the birth certificate, sign in front of a notary an acknowledgement of paternity. And that it's state by state, so this is not applicable to all. So it establishes paternity, or at least it's a giant leg of what you have to do. But with regards to the right of access, to be able to hold your baby, to be able to do all the things that we tell people to do so that your child is accustomed to you, unless there is an agreement, they don't have that right. Now, it's interesting because the court has the authority to establish paternity with genetic testing pre-birth. It scares me, but it also assures me. The court could make sure that a father, someone that is found to be the father, could be nearby near the time of birth. But then we get into the child development fear of when everybody's got all this anxiety these little infants are feeding on that anxiety. And who are we really helping? So when the relationship was an intact but unmarried relationship and a child is produced, sometimes it's easier because at least you know that person, or at least a little bit. You've lived together. And so perhaps when the baby comes home, y'all could still live together. And that benefit of being attached to both parents doesn't get lost. The ones that really are just frightening on so many levels, the ones that weren't living together, but we're doing perils of living together, and that's one of them. So you're living together, you have this baby, you stay together for 8 months, and then somebody gets tired of the baby screaming, or they don't like how people are taking care of it, and they split. Then my advice to both parents, get to a court system as quickly as possible. If you don't have resources, all of our attorney generals will help you out, some faster and more equitable than others. It not only is it state by state, it's county by county. And I mean, there are some that, and that's a shame. But I think one of the benefits of the federal government being involved in that, because of the benefits the state gets for children, we're going to see more equal. But let's jump into child support. If people have high wealth and they have multiple places that they go live and meet people and decide to have relationships with people, child support from one state to another can be vastly different. So perils of not being married, it makes a difference where paternity is established, like on a magnitude that people will forum shop. If they have the ability to establish paternity in a state that has low child support, that father will probably take that opportunity.
Oh, yeah. He'll go file the paperwork there. And as you say, forum shop. So that's a situation where there are potentially more than one forum available, one court, because the parties maybe even live in different states or have homes in several states, as you said. And when things don't work out and you do need to go to court, people look at, well, which court's going to come up with the decisions that better suit what I want out of this?
Right. That was one of the best benefits. There's so many good benefits to the American Academy, but one of them was if I represented or someone is looking for where's the best place to get this filed, you have a network of people you can ask and go, okay, here's the facts, here's the math, what would your state do? And then figure out where do they have homes where we can make this happen.
Yeah. I get those calls being licensed in Connecticut and California those are not two uncommon states that people seem to have homes in when they have multiple homes. And so I do get that question fairly often, which one behooves me? Really, the critical point for people to understand here, and it does go both ways for both parents, is without court intervention, you don't have your right to child support to receive it. You have to go to court to have that established. And you don't have right as the parent, the father, and this is purely because we know the mother was the mother because the mother gave birth to the child, right? We have somewhat antiquated laws because now with the whole reproductive health, not reproductive health, but reproductive abilities that we have in this world, a child might not be born of the mother who is the genetic parent of that child, but that goes beyond, that's another episode as well. But for fathers, they have to establish legally their paternity and then go to court for access rights. And without the court, they're reliant upon the goodwill of their other parent, of the co-parent. And so it goes both ways. It's like you need to go to court if you want child support on one side, and you need to go to court if you want access on the other side. And if you are unmarried parents, that is a paradigm that does not change. You have to go to court.
That's correct. For if you're married, the court system takes care of both of you. Not automatically. When the relationship ends, it does. I don't know what the right answer is for couples because each one and each day may be a different answer. But it seems that if you're going to bring another person into the mix with a child, you really ought to have a very clear understanding of what the game is. You said that most people that are living together, both are working. Now, somebody's pregnant. What's going to happen? Is somebody going to stay home for the first 3 months? Because you hear all the immunity issues are better if that happens. Are you going to say 6 months, 3 years? There are statistics depending on who you talk to and what the expectation is. But if that person gets out of the workforce, then what? And it's interesting that they're both working, but there's no comparison of income. So if somebody is primarily responsible for childcare because somebody makes a giant amount of money and the other person makes an average or normal kind of money, it doesn't take much to see who's going to be staying home when the baby's sick, or the toddler needs to go to daycare, or the elementary school kid needs somebody to pick him up and take him someplace, or whatever the facts are. How does that work? If you're the mom that has the lesser income and you're not married, it gets particularly scary when there's a difficult breakup and there's a custody dispute. Because if you don't own a piece of the house and you don't have the big dollars to help support these kids in the manner to which they have been accustomed, are you at a disadvantage in a custody dispute? And I hate to be so candid about it, but he with the gold rules.
Yeah.
We're kidding ourselves if we don't acknowledge that even a great parent is at a disadvantage if the other good enough parent has significantly higher financial abilities.
Yeah, that's really a key. I thank you for your candor. I know it's hard to say it and it's not hard for people to hear, but one thing that we know very, very clearly is that going to court or even negotiating when there's a conflict or a disagreement or an open question, just an open question, which this is one open question after another, right? One unanswered, the law does not answer your question for you, so you two have to work it out. Anytime you involve that type of open-ended situation, it is going to cost money to resolve it. And the more conflictual it is, the more expensive it is. And he or she who has more access to money and funds has the ability to fight that fight better. And that's what it turns into so often, and the paradigm of this that is probably, I think, the most concerning is we operate as attorneys in that realm most of the time of being divorce attorneys, right? So where the law does, maybe not adequately at all times, but it does provide for the reorganization financially and structurally of a family. The law is there as a construct. But what's happening in our world and in our society is people make the choices to not marry, but live in all other ways as if they are in that relationship because it's what they've seen and what seems like a relationship and how a relationship goes in this world. But the law doesn't provide any structure for those relationships. And so there's almost always someone or someones, because you've pointed out very eloquently here that the children get caught up in all of this. We know that one of the most harmful things for children, divorce or parents who are separating, is the level of conflict between their parents. That's well established, in mental health circles and all. But unfortunately, when the law doesn't provide any construct and you leave these things open-ended, it leads to conflict for so many parents.
Right. And I think a lot of our law is, as we've learned from our mistakes, and I've been practicing long enough to see a lot of those mistakes, inflict difficulties on these families. We've also seen a movement to offer alternatives. So there's collaborative law, there's dispute resolution such as early case interventions, mediations, arbitrations. In California, they do a lot of mediations without the lawyers, just the clients trying to, especially when there's children involved, to try to do less harm. Because if the relationship was volatile, et cetera, it might be actually better for children for the relationship to end, as long as the ending part of it isn't more torturous than staying in a toxic family environment. But we will always stay curious as to why people do what they do. For those of us in the trenches that love doing this work, we will always look for alternatives and offer those to clients, not to tell them what to do, but just to give them these options. You can do it this way, this way, this way, and this way. You have to have agreements, except for litigation. That's the only time you don't have to have an agreement to go do something. And then the person in a black robe who knows nothing about your family will help you work all this out. But sometimes that's just what we need to do. It's just a struggle when people do not get into these situations more informed about what their rights are, what their options are, and what the consequences are if you don't plan ahead.
Well, and then maybe the final takeaway from this episode for those who are listening, because we've really, in a half hour, we've been able to maybe open people's eyes to a lot of the things that they need to think about. But would a final tip or insight for people, they think divorce attorneys are people that you call, or family law attorneys are people that you call and go sit with or have a chat with when you're facing the end of the relationship. Maybe the takeaway is, if you're considering cohabiting, having children with someone you're not married to, et cetera, what do you think the value of sitting with a family law attorney in advance might be?
I think most family lawyers would welcome the opportunity to give them warning about the benefits and the detriments of marriage. It's not all, rainbows, butterflies, and unicorns. There's some detriments to getting married if you come into the relationship with wealth, making sure that if that's what you want to protect you. But knowing, just being educated about before you move in together with somebody and your stuff goes to their place. Y'all can live together, but if you've got your own independent, then y'all just keep at it. You don't need to talk to anybody. But listen to podcasts like this. Go talk to a lawyer who understands the pros and the cons and offers, if your state allows it, even cohabitation agreements so that it's written. It's not just understood by these independent contracts like the mortgage or the lease or whatever it is, because you can fix most of these perils if you plan ahead.
If you plan ahead. So, and that's what the lawyer is really there to do. And I think you're 100% correct. Most family law attorneys would welcome the opportunity to sit with a client and educate and help give some advice about your personal situation. And that means you go into this with what Susan is talking about, both Susans, as a matter of fact, what we are talking about, which is going into that playing house situation, to go back to the title. But you go into that situation informed, making choices, and perhaps coming to agreements so that you both are operating on the same playing field, that you both know what to expect, and nobody finds themselves or their children, if that happens to be the case, at the end of the relationship, if it were to end, whether it ends by a breakup or by one of you passing away, as you pointed out, with clear understandings about how things will be handled. I think that's really the final key. Education is everything, right?
Always.
Well, Susan, I greatly appreciate your bringing this topic to the table and for sharing your wisdom and your deep thoughts on this, because this is one of those things when we practice for so long, and what we do is probably 90% helping people through divorces. We do tend to forget that there's an entire other area here where education is paramount, and so many problems can be solved with that education. So you've really opened a door for so many of my listeners today.
It's been my pleasure.
So before we go, I just want to make sure, if someone were to want to reach out to you, I mentioned that you're in Texas, in the Houston area, what is the best way to get in touch with you?
Probably the best way to get in touch with the office is either to go to our website, HoustonDivorceLawyer.com, or you can call our office at 713-622-1600, and we'll help you out. If you're looking in another state, I suggest that you look at the AAML website. We've got representatives in every state, almost all major cities. I would suggest that if you've got several choices, look for someone who does premarital agreements, because then they know what we're talking about without having to go do any research.
Yep. You can do a premarital agreement. You can do a pre-living together agreement, a pre-cohabitation agreement. So thank you so much. This is, again, I'm delighted that we were able to at least bring some awareness to this topic and give people some pathways forward. So thank you again, Susan.
My pleasure.
Thank you for joining me today on the Divorce and Beyond podcast. I hope you found some information and inspiration to help you on this journey. Please join me every Monday at 6 a.m. Eastern Standard Time for a new episode. And if you like the show, please take the time to subscribe and leave me a 5-star review on iTunes. You can also find more information on the website at divorceandbeyondpod.com, where you'll find links to the YouTube channel, transcripts of the episodes, and other bonus content. So I'll see you next week to help you move through your divorce and beyond.